It wouldn't be an overstatement to say that the first time I heard Hands at Work founder George Snyman speak about leaving everything behind to follow Jesus to some of the poorest and most desolate places on the planet, it changed my life. And my story is not unique. Through George and his family's faithfulness, individuals and churches from around the globe have been mobilized to respond meaningfully to the biggest widow and orphan crisis in human history. It's my pleasure to announce that George will be visiting here this fall. He's preaching at Lakeview on both Sunday services November 5th. Mark your calendars, you won't want to miss it.
Do you like to sing? Well, now's your opportunity. Join the Christmas choir. We're starting Tuesday, November 14th at 7 p.m. here at Lakeview Church. Everyone is welcome. And that's right, rehearsals have moved to Tuesdays. For more information, email choir@lakeviewchurch.com.
I've been coming to Cross Connect for 3 years, and being a big church, this is my way of getting to know people in the church, getting out on a Sunday night, and being around women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other. This month we have Gloria Reimer joining us to share about spiritual gifting, so come see what God has in store for you.
As me, if you know me, I have opinions on everything. If you ask me anything about a hot topic, I've got opinions. But as Christ followers, we need to engage as a community and put aside our knee-jerk preferences and look at hard, complicated topics as a generous, creative, gracious, compassionate, just, as God would. So I feel like as a community, we need to practice doing this together and lean into what does a creative, generous God look at this issue like? How can I practice that in community and then maybe practice that a little bit more outside of my community?
Formation 3 is the class where we engage and talk about complicated issues in our world. And this time, we're talking about sex. Join us on Thursday, November 9th at 7 p.m. in the atrium to hear our guest speaker, Graham Lauber, my bro, talk to us about sexuality and spirituality. Questions? Visit me at the newsstand or email me at allison@lakeviewchurch.com.
Today, following the service, we will be serving up a link brunch. So stick around for hot, fluffy pancakes, hot sausages, goopy, sticky syrup, and coffee. Donations are always welcome and appreciated to help cover the cost. Brunch is a suggested price of $10 a family. So stick around, eat, share community, and we'll see you there.
Lakeview's annual general meeting is coming up November 5th, immediately following the second service. This is your opportunity to get an update on how Lakeview Church is doing and where we are headed. Everyone is welcome, but in order to vote, you need to be a member. Remember, Sunday, November 5th, following the second service. Thank you.
Starting in November, parents with young children can bring their kids to run around in the gym during open gym here at the church, Thursdays, 9:30 to 11:30 in the morning. Also in November, during that open gym time, I'll be teaching a free Pilates class for moms. It starts at 10 a.m. So if you want to take part, just bring a mat. It's all abilities welcome from beginner up. There'll be lots of modifications. We can just breathe and move while our kids play. I hope to see you there.
I grew up going to church and knowing there was a Bible in church, but I never had one at home. And when I walked into Lakeview, it was all about the Bible, and it was very interesting to me, so I needed to learn a little bit more about that. As I took that class with Allison, I was able to understand a little bit more about what I was reading, and I'm still fascinated by it all. For anyone out there thinking of taking this class about the Bible, you just have to do it. It is the coolest book, and you're really going to enjoy it.
Formation 1 is happening today during the 11 a.m. service in the atrium. If you're listening to me in the early service, grab yourself a coffee during the link and come join us. If you're listening to this in the second service, it's not too late. You can leave now and come join us. I expect an influx of people.
Joe. Well, we are halfway through our series on, we're halfway through the book of Job. We're a little bit more than halfway through. It's a 5-part series. Today is part 4. It feels like a bit of a marathon, doesn't it? It's a heavy book. I don't know how many of you have been tracking, maybe even reading along at home, reading all 42 chapters. But today we're heading into the second half of the book. And just to reassure you, the book of Job actually is a story. It's a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So we're not just kind of wandering in the wilderness with all the different stuff that we've been going through the last couple of weeks. Just to recap, Job is the guy who's been jinxed. He's been hit by a triple whammy. First of all, his family is killed in a freak accident. And that's after losing all his wealth. So he's dealing with profound traumatic grief. Complicating that, he's deathly sick. He does have his wife alongside him. She makes one cameo appearance. She is also obviously going through the same kind of grief, having lost her entire family of 10 children. It's often true that, or sometimes true, that grief brings people closer together, but it's more often true, I think, that grief drives people apart. And that seems to be the case in Job's story. So the first thing, he's dealing with a crisis of grief, a crisis of loss. Secondly, he's dealing with his so-called friends, guys that came to comfort him, to sit with him in his pain, but they now are attacking him. They are blaming him. This is acid in the face as far as friendship goes. And so it's a crisis of injustice. And thirdly, he is going through a crisis of faith. Job has no doubt that God is present in the midst of his pain and this injustice. He just doesn't know which side God is on. Or even more, he suspects quite strongly that God is against him. So these are three huge burdens, three crises that Job is dealing with. And he's only got two hands. So it's hard to hold on to this all as he's trying to figure out how to walk through this, how to carry these burdens, and what he can leave behind. So for almost half the book now, from chapter 4 through chapter 21, Job has been verbally slapped up by his friends. After each attack, Job gets up, dusts himself off, and then responds. Either it's to God or it's to the friends. And these friends do not let up. And so this is where we start today as we listen to Eliphaz rising to new heights of venomous accusation. Then Eliphaz the Temanite replied, "Do you think it's because God cares about your purity that he's disciplining you, putting you on the spot? Hardly. It's because you're a first-class moral failure, because there's no end to your sins. When people came to you for help, you took the shirts off their backs, exploited their helplessness. You wouldn't so much as give a drink to the thirsty, or food, not a scrap of it, to the hungry. And there you sat, strong and honored by everyone, surrounded by immense wealth. You turned poor widows away from your door. Heartless, you crushed orphans. Now you're the one trapped in terror, paralyzed by fear. Suddenly the tables have turned. How do you like living in the dark, sightless, up to your neck in floodwaters?" This is astounding. This is the same guy who started off in chapter 4 by complimenting Job, by saying, "Job, you have been such a help to those in need." This is not simply an attack. If these words had come from a stranger, yeah, they would hurt, they would sting, but they wouldn't have had quite as much power. But they came from somebody that Job thought of as a friend, somebody that he thought would know better, somebody that would have understood what's going up to, somebody who said he looked up to Job. When this kind of attack comes from someone close to you, from someone you thought would know better, it breaks trust. And that's a whole different level of pain. Some of you know that a few years ago, I and Darlene both, we worked at a small Christian college. We hit a crisis of enrollment, and that basically led to the college closing. It was a challenging experience. It was the kind of year that demanded 150%, 200% from everybody involved so that we could give the students as good, as positive a final year as possible. And we saw God show up in many miraculous ways. The closing weekend, it was hard, I'll admit. It was lots of celebration and lots of grieving, all mixed together. There was the awesomeness of graduation and a little bit of funeral mixed in with the whole thing. But this was the hardest part of it all. Every so often, there'd be comments on social media. Don't think you guys prayed hard enough to keep the school open. Don't think the faculty was praying hard enough. And that hurts to hear that. Now, wasn't many, and I get where that can come from. You know, this is one way of people dealing with their own loss. But that's what happens. That's what happens. These attacks do happen. And all of us here at some point in our lives are going to get some kind of attack like that. I have no doubt. So it can hurt a lot. This might help to put it in perspective. We all know that the only bonding agent that holds a personal relationship together is trust. A relationship held together only by a contract is not a personal relationship. A community held together only by force is never a human community. Only trust holds personal relationships, friendship, marriage, family, or a larger community of persons together. Trust is both the beauty and the fragility of being human. Our need for trusting relationships is inborn, bred in the bone, part of the human design. To break trust is thus to assault the law of life. It's not only harmful, it's a deep moral wrong. The wrong is compounded because it saps the violated person of courage to trust anyone again. So, if you've been attacked like Job was attacked, don't be surprised if your trust muscles are bruised, cramped up, if you find it hard to extend a hand to anyone. I don't blame you, and neither does God. In the next few chapters, it only gets worse for Job. But to get the full picture of what's going on, we need to take a step back. We need to step back from the trees to see the forest. So if you are reading through the book of Job, chapter by chapter, you can be forgiven if you think that once we leave the terra firma of chapter 2, that we're diving into a shoreless, raging sea of rants, of speeches. I want you to know that there is a method to it all. There's a very clear pattern where each of the friends speaks in turn, followed by Job. It looks kind of like this. We've got Eliphaz, Job, Bildad, Job, Zophar, Job. Eliphaz, Job, Bildad, Job, Zophar, Job. Okay? You get the pattern. Zophar? So good. You knew that was coming, didn't you? It had to be said. Okay. So we are now starting at chapter 22. This is the third round now that we're dealing with. And so we've got Eliphaz, Job, Bildad, Job. There's no Zophar. He's gone. And then Job picks up again. So, and there's more. There's more. If you look at the transition from Job speaking in chapter 26 to Job speaking in chapter 27, the beginning of chapter 27 sounds like Job is kind of waiting for something to happen, and then he continues to speak, because it says explicitly, and Job continued to speak. Now, you don't need that if somebody's just continuing to speak. So it's almost like he's standing there tapping his finger, waiting for Zophar, and Zophar is so far away, who knows where he is, but he's just not there. So something is falling apart. The pattern is breaking down. The debate is grinding to a halt. But wait, there's more. And this is where it gets really weird. In each of Job's speeches in this section, in round 3, there are parts of his words that do not sound like Job. If you actually can kind of get a sense of what each of the different characters sounds like, it sounds like the friends. And so we hear Job talking about the certainty of God's judgment on the wicked, even talks about how the children of the wicked will be slain. Well, that's stuff that we've heard from the friends before in their tactless comfort of Job. So what's going on here? Is Job being brainwashed? Is he mocking them? There are some commentaries that say, oh, obviously it was just pages that got mixed up in the original. I don't think so. This is my theory. My theory is that the author of Job is the Shakespeare of the Old Testament. He is writing this with every artistic literary technique at his disposal. He's writing this story deliberately, artistically. And so the author's method at this point is madness. The words that we are reading are calculated confusion. The story is slowly and methodically pulling us to that place of extreme conflict where it feels like you're going crazy, like you're losing it. Did he actually say that? Did those words really actually come from her mouth? Am I hearing the things? Is it possible that I'm hearing what I just thought I heard them say? I hope you've never been at that place. But I'm sure many of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been in that kind of church meeting. I've heard it between former friends and business partners. I've seen it when a marriage falls apart. I'm hearing words that I can't believe coming out of people I respected, people that I thought I knew. It's madness. You think you're going crazy. This can't be happening. It's not possible. It's happening. So, if you are in that place right now, or if you find yourself in that place, I'll be honest. I don't have a lot of words for you right now. I don't have a thoughtful question that can lead us forward. And even if I did, why should you trust me? But I will say this one thing. I will say that if you're in that place where nothing makes sense, if you're in that whirlpool of madness where there's shifting sand, shifting voices everywhere, it's happened before. I won't say you're not alone, because maybe you are in your particular dilemma or challenge right now. Maybe you feel as alone as you've ever been. But I will say this. There are footprints around. There are signs that other people have been here, have passed this way before. That may or may not be a comfort to you, but it's true. You are not the first to be sucked into this vortex of chaos. People have been here before, including some of the greatest saints that God has ever placed on this planet. So let's go back now to the text, and let's listen to little Bildad spout off his little speech. Now, I always think of Bildad as little. I think it's because when I was a kid, we had a Bible joke book at home. And so you've probably heard this one if you had Bible joke books in your house. Who is the shortest man in the Bible? Well, it's Bildad the Shuhite. So I always think of him as grumpy, as short, sort of as a sour egg Humpty Dumpty figure. Anyway, this is what Bildad comes in with. Bildad the Shuhite again attacked Job. God is sovereign. God is fearsome. Everything in the cosmos fits and works in his plan. Can anyone count his angel armies? Is there any place where his light doesn't shine? How can a mere mortal presume to stand up to God? Job. How can an ordinary person pretend to be guiltless? Why, even the moon has its flaws. Even the stars aren't perfect in God's eyes. So how much less plain men and women, slugs and maggots by comparison? Now, last week we saw some stunning pictures of Saturn. And the last time I was up here in spring, I shared a little bit about my love of the night sky, of the stars. So you might understand that I've got a little bit of a problem with Bildad's take on things here. Bildad the pessimist. Bildad the blind. Bildad the patron saint of what is sometimes called, worm theology. That's a religious way of looking at things that delights in human wretchedness, in calling us worms and slugs and maggots. Now, there is truth here, of course. God is sovereign. God is fearsome. But it's mixed with the poison of pessimism. Bildad only sees flaws, does not see that God himself called this world very good. His flawed views of the world unmasks a flawed view of God himself. So his attempt to spotlight the holiness, the power of God, backfires, and he ends up dishonoring both God and God's creation. And what does Job see when he lifts his eyes up from the trash heap? There are people out there getting by with murder, stealing and lying and cheating. They rip off the poor and exploit the unfortunate, push the helpless into the ditch, bully the weak so that they fear for their lives. The poor, like stray dogs and cats, scavenge for food in back alleys. They sort through the garbage of the rich, eke out survival on handouts. Homeless, they shiver through cold nights on the street. They've no place to lay their heads. Exposed to the weather, wet and frozen, they huddle in makeshift shelters. Nursing mothers have their babies snatched from them. The infants of the poor are kidnapped and sold. They go about patched and threadbare. Even the hard workers go hungry. No matter how backbreaking their labor, they can never make ends meet. People are dying right and left, groaning in torment. The wretched cry out for help. And God does nothing, acts like nothing's wrong. This could be today's newscast. It's a bitter prayer full of despair and anger. But mixed in with that, do you notice something else that's going on here? Something new. Excuse me. Job is noticing the suffering of others. Even in his pain and betrayal, it's a sign that transformation is beginning to happen. He's crying out on behalf of others. He's crying out to a God who he knows should care about the poor, the marginalized, the murdered and missing. His outcry is a sign of a better God than Bildad's. It's a sign of hope, a sign of moving forward in his crisis. So, what do you see? In the circumstances that you find yourself in right now, what do you notice when you look around? What catches your eye? Maybe this can help. Whenever you find tears in your eyes, especially unexpected tears, it's well to pay the closest attention. They're not only telling you something about the secret of who you are, but more often than not, God is speaking to you through them of the mystery of where you have come from, and is summoning you to where, if your soul is to be saved, you should go next. So, what do you see? When you look around, do you see flaws everywhere? Are you someone who sees the pain of the world, or even the pain of one other person? Or do you see something altogether different yet? And what is that telling you about God and about God's work in you? What do you see? Okay, so we have watched 3 brutal rounds of Job versus friends. The conversation stalls out. There is no turning back and no way forward. Job is standing at the edge of the abyss, standing, waiting. And then there's a voice that starts to talk about mining. Silver has its mines, and gold a place for refining. Iron is extracted from the earth. The smelted rocks yield copper. Men make an end of darkness when they pierce to the uttermost depths the black and lightless rock. Mines they dig in places where there is no foothold, dangling, swaying, far from others to help. This chapter, chapter 28, is an enigma. It's a riddle in the dark. It's a sudden and unexpected shift in tone, in topic, and maybe even in speaker. Is this even Job still talking? Some Bibles might say that. I don't think it is, and many commentators don't. I read it more as an interlude, a place with a different voice, singing gently off from the side, an opportunity to reflect, to pause, to consider. Job has been wrestling with despair for much of the story. He's ranting, he's lamenting, and he has invoked image after image of darkness and cloud and gloom and shadow. And he's gazed wistfully downwards into the cold, murky underworld, the land of the dead, yearning for his own death. But this interlude is different. Earth's surface is a field for grain, but its depths are a churning fire, forging sapphire from stone and chiseling gold from rocks. This is a new voice, where the darkness is a place of warmth, of precious treasure, and something greater than treasure. Where, oh where, will wisdom be found? Where does insight hide? Mortals don't have a clue, haven't the slightest idea where to look. Earth's depths say it's not here, and ocean deeps echo, never heard of it. It can't be bought with the finest gold. No amount of silver can get it. God alone knows the way to wisdom. He knows the exact place to find it. He knows where everything is on earth. He sees everything under heaven. After he commanded the winds to blow and measured out the waters, arranged for the rain and set off explosions of thunder and lightning, he focused on wisdom, made sure it was all set and tested and ready. Then he addressed the human race. Here it is. Fear of the Lord, that's wisdom. And insight means shunning evil. So at this place, Job has hit rock bottom. And in this utter darkness, with no way out, Job stumbles onto something firm and hard. It's small but precious. It has the ring of truth. The fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. And insight means shunning evil. Job has stumbled into wisdom, that indefinable divine quality that brings coherence and meaning to life, that pulls it all together, that makes life beautiful and sound and fruitful. Wisdom deeply rooted in a respectful recognition that God is God and we are not. And this discovery is also a riddle. For Job, for the story of Job, it's a riddle. What does this mean for Job? Have we heard these words before? Fears God, shuns evil. Yes, we have. We've heard them 3 times already at the very beginning of the story. The narrator says it, and God himself affirms it twice. Job is a person who fears God and shuns evil. So what if the riddle is this, that Job, in the middle of his pain and protest, his sarcastic arguments and his desperate raw prayers, what if Job is the model of wisdom? What if Job is the sign of insight? But here's the kicker. If that's what it is, Job can't know about it. Job doesn't know about it because Job has never read the book of Job. Job has not heard the narrator talk about him this way. He's just got to rely on his own sense of integrity throughout this whole mess to keep his plow deep. He never finds out that he is right where he needed to be to discover the things that can be seen only in the darkness. For there are some things that only can be seen in the darkness. Exhibit A, total solar eclipse. It's the rarest of sights. As the moon's shadow approaches and engulfs for 1 or 2 heart-stopping minutes, engulfs the entire world. Day turns to night, and the thinning light takes on a quality you have never seen before. And then, as the shadow approaches and overtakes, only then the magical, haunting, incomprehensible sight becomes visible. The sun's corona, its crown of glory, glimmers into the darkness. Rose-colored flares flash like jewels around the edge of the moon's limb. You can't see this sight any other way. 99% eclipse doesn't cut it. You won't see it. It must be 100%. Complete shadow. So, does it work this way in the spiritual world as well? Eclipses are predictable. I can't say that it always works this way in the spiritual world, and it's never predictable how God does what he does. But yes, it happens time and time again. In the chaotic darkness of grief, in the sting of injustice, in the loneliness of spiritual crisis, people keep stumbling into that firm, hard truth at the bottom of the deepest pit. Let me tell you a brief story. Maybe you've heard it before, but it's a story worth telling and retelling. It's a story that actually we sang ourselves as a church. We sang ourselves into that story last week It's the story of a well-off lawyer, Mr. Spafford. He and his wife were well off, but they also knew grief. They had lost a 2-year-old son to scarlet fever. The year was 1871. A few months later, they lost much of their business investments and properties as a major portion of Chicago burnt to the ground. 300 dead, 100,000 homeless. The years following that trauma were hard, but in 1873, 2 years later, the Spafford family decided that they wanted to go on a well-deserved vacation to Europe. But at the last minute, a business problem arose, and so Mr. Spafford sent off Anna and their 4 daughters onto the ship, and he said he would catch the next ship, follow along right behind. And that's when tragedy struck once again. A few days out, the ocean liner collided with another ship, and it sunk rapidly. Over 200 went down with the ship, including all 4 of the Spafford daughters. The mother, Anna, was found unconscious, clinging onto some flotsam, and she was rescued. She landed in Wales about a week later, and from there she sent a telegram with the words, "Saved, alone." Spafford, Mr. Spafford, no doubt suffering both grief and survivor guilt, left immediately to join his wife in Europe. Now, in a plot twist that sounds like it comes directly out of the book of Job, apparently their home church somehow decided that this was the Lord's discipline on the family, that it was some judgment on them as well. In any case, Spafford embarked on that painful voyage across the Atlantic. And at one point, the captain called him up to his cabin and gently let him know that they were near to the spot where that first ship had gone down, where his daughters had perished. Spafford went back to his room, got out a piece of notepaper, and wrote these words: "When peace, like a river, attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to know, it is well with my soul." I like what he wrote. Did you catch the one word that's different as well? God has taught me to know it is well. It's not always easy to say that. I love this song and I will always sing it. But there are times when I don't feel it. I don't feel that it's well with my soul, but I sing it. I sing it in solidarity with those who have been in the depths, who have found that cold, hard truth that can only be found in the absolute darkness. The fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. I want to take you to one last place. Exhibit C. It's another cave, deeper and darker even than the mines of Job. Not physically deeper, perhaps. In fact, it doesn't even look like a cave now. All the stone was excavated to reshape it as a monument, and that's oh, you can hardly see that. Well, whatever. There's a monument right there on the left, and if you want to, well, we'll see if we can figure that out for next service. We're standing inside a church, and there's a small monument there with this, built over where the cave was. It's dwarfed within the interior of these much larger domes. The air is thick with incense and ancient prayers. To the eyes, it's hardly recognizable as being a former cave at all. It's been covered over by centuries of tradition, adorned with gold and silver and jewels taken from the deep mines like Job's. But this greater cave, before it became the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, it was the site of the greatest darkness, the most profound loss of hope and faith and strength that the universe has ever seen. Not 40 yards from this cave, just past where that beam of sunlight emerges, is the rock outcropping where likely stood the cross. Calvary, where crowds stood and heard the terrifying cry that came from a dying Messiah. My God, why have you abandoned me? There was darkness, there was despair, there was death, and the cave. Or maybe we should call it a mine, where the greatest treasure the world's ever been given lay hidden. I'll call up the band now. Job's story is now at a crossroad, in the depths of the darkness. And maybe yours is too. And so that leaves us with a question. Are you and I ready to see this journey, our various darknesses, also as a crossroad, pointing to the deeper treasure found in the tomb, the tiny space where the light of Jesus' resurrection first exploded into the world, a small, cramped place of death that's now become ground zero for God's project of renewing all things. A rocky tomb, the place where the wisdom of God becomes the redemption of the world. What will it take for you and for me to discover the treasure in the dark?